On today's episode of the show, we discuss 2025 basketball recruiting, explaining why Kaden Magwood needs to be a priority for the Louisville Cardinals, a top 20 player visiting this summer, and more coming up here shortly.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. All about basketball on this off-season episode of the show. We begin with recruiting, explaining why Kaden Magwood needs to be a priority for the Cardinals in the 2025 class. Top 20 player visiting this summer, that is Shelton Henderson. And then to conclude the show, we'll discuss something Louisville hasn't done for almost a decade. So a lot of good stuff to discuss on today's episode of the show. Recruiting is starting to heat up more and more. Louisville staff has been all over the country scouting talent. Just this weekend, they were at Martha Lane Collins High School to see some of the best talent in the state of Kentucky. Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno, some younger players that are rising onto Louisville's roster like Taylon Kinney from Newport. So we're seeing Kelsey and company work like madmen to recruit not only the 2025, but 26 and 27 recruiting classes. Louisville got the first high school commitment of Pat Kelsey's tenure just a couple months ago, or basically about a month ago, when Kenai Ruth's top 40 prospect committed to the team unexpectedly after he was released from his national letter of intent from Michigan. But the focus turns to the 2025 class. Louisville offering a multitude of different players, and we're going to start seeing the Cardinals really start to prioritize certain prospects. One player that I believe that Louisville needs to make one of the priorities, if not the top priority at the guard spot, is Kaden Magwood. For those who don't know who that is or need a little bit of a refresher on his backstory, Magwood started his career from the 502. He played his freshman season at Western High School, was a very, very solid player for the Warriors, and ended up transferring to Oak Hill Academy, where he has been pretty solid the past couple seasons. He now is at Combine Academy, which is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and will probably play his senior season of high school basketball there. Magwood was basically right around the fringe top 100 area over the past year or so, and in the most recent 24/7 Sports rankings, rose to 55th in the country. He's ranked as the 11th best combo guard and third best prospect in the state of North Carolina. Probably closer to 6'1" than 6'3". His profile lists him as 6'3", probably in between those two numbers, but regardless, I do think it matters a little bit. If he is still growing and has gone from 6'1" to 6'3", that would be tremendous, but nonetheless, he is a very special player. Over the past couple months, my stance has gone from, Louisville does need to kick the tires on this recruitment. They should definitely show interest to now, okay, this should be one of the most important players on the Cardinals board. Magwood is a microwave volume scorer that can score from all three levels of the half court. He has the control to utilize the change of pace and change of direction very abruptly to create his offense around the rim. He's crafty with the ball in his hands. explosive guy off the dribble, but also incredible three-point shooter. Phenomenal shooter in so many different ways. Catch and shoot, stepping into the shot, off movement, creating his own shot, you name it. There's really not an aspect of half-court offense that he struggles with. Now, he will have to be better in terms of facilitating and showing that he can ultimately be a team's point guard, because if he were to be a shooting guard, he's probably more of an undersized two guard. But still, that's why I say that if he's growing a little bit, it definitely is somewhat significant because of what he projects to be at the next level. He's listed as a combo guard. What a lot of college programs are likely going to want to do is morph him into being a point guard. For him to be able to do that, he has to show the ability to be a solid facilitator and a guy that can create for his teammates. I thought that he's shown some progress in that regard, especially in the AAU season from multiple accounts. But again, it is a process that will have to continually show improvement, which I ultimately think that he can get there. Defensively, solid on-ball defender, quick hands, ability to jump the passing lanes, but his calling card with his skill set is his scoring. For those who need a little bit of a reference, think Jordan Poole to where he can facilitate for his teammates. Now, I think that Jordan Poole isn't that great of a defender, and whether Magwood becomes a great defender or not is to be determined. But if he's serviceable in the very least, then it's definitely okay. But Jordan Poole is the player that he reminds me of because of the craftiness, the creativity, just the overall skill set, creative shooter, creative scorer. I keep coming back to this word, creativity, and that's what it comes down to. Also sort of gives me like flashes of Cam Thomas's scoring, to where at LSU in his one season, Thomas really wasn't known for much but scoring, but he scored so well that it didn't really matter. And that caused his draft stock to take a little bit of a hit. But now at the NBA level for the Brooklyn Nets, he's scoring a ton again. He is a big-time shot maker. And that's what Kaden Magwood projects to be at the collegiate level. I found a stat line that was hilariously incredible from I think it was the DMV live session, the first one, in his first debut, or in his first game in his debut. Listen to this stat line: 34 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists. Incredible. Now, Louisville went to visit his team playing down in Orlando just a couple weeks ago. There has been, obviously, the scholarship offered, communication between the two parties. Ultimately, now it is a matter of getting him onto campus for an official visit, which I believe he was on for an unofficial not too long ago, if I'm not mistaken. But this is the type of guy to whether or not he's going to be a true contributor year one, which I think his scoring ability and his advanced offensive repertoire does give him the opportunity to be sort of a spark plug off the bench. I'm not sure if he's going to start year one, because requiring a true freshman to come in to start, especially those that aren't officially, or even McDonald's All-Americans, sometimes it doesn't work out where they start right away. But year two, I think the opportunity is there for him to be a very good player in the ACC. And when it's all said and done, a prolific scorer for the University of Louisville in his time, depending on how much or how long he were to stay. Look, I find it really, really tough to believe that there are 30 better players in the 2025 class than Kaden Magwood. Just the scoring toolkit, the craftiness. There might not be a player in the class that can pound for pound score with Kaden Magwood. Now, that is obviously very high praise, and there are some good players in the 2025 class. I'm not saying that to say that, Magwood should be a top 10 player, but even outside the top 50 just doesn't seem like a justifiable ranking. I think he's going to continue to rise. I think the main questions are whether or not he can show that he can facilitate. I have no doubt that there are questions over his size as it relates to the role that he's likely to play. So, yeah, I mean, if he continually shows the ability to create for his teammates, that ranking is going to rise up higher, and he'll project to be more of a true number one rather than an undersized two guard. So, look, the sky's the limit for this kid. I think he needs to be a priority in this class. He operates well in transition. He can score quickly. I mean, you look down, for 15 seconds at a game, and he goes from 0 points to 10 really, really quickly. He's one of those type of guys that can light it up really, really quickly. So I look at this, and the local ties make sense. You create sort of or not really a trend. You don't create a trend. You sort of continue that trend to where, the local area has always had some talent, whether or not it's Louisville level or not. It was another conversation. But, I mean, look at the guys that have played here at Louisville. Dwayne Sutton, Quentin Snyder, Ray Spalding. The list goes on and on. David Johnson. And I know that Kaden Magwood went away in high school, but still he does have those local ties. So I think that this would be nice from an optics level where you can go out and get a high caliber player with local ties, but you also can go out and get a very, very good guard that I think is a top 30 player and could contribute early on, but definitely year two. I think that this could be a home run type addition, and I would love to see Louisville add him to the 2025 class. As I mentioned, recruiting is starting to pick up in full force. You're going to start hearing about more and more visits. The Cardinals will receive a visit this summer from a top 20 prospect, Shelton Henderson. A couple things to discuss in this recruitment, but the ceiling is off the charts. I'm going to read you an excerpt from a national recruiting analyst that might make you do a double take when it comes to this recruitment in general. We will discuss this recruitment in a little bit more coming up here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop, but as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I want them to, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone all season long and all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Also, before we get into the next segment, I want to take this time to remind you about Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel without all of the screaming on mainstream networks. It brings you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Coming up here on the second segment, we continue to discuss 2025 recruiting. I appreciate everyone for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. I appreciate you all tuning in this offseason as, like we just mentioned in the ad read, topics are getting a little scarce. Sports have winded down. All we really can talk about now is football previews, recruiting, and more. Working to get some guests back on the show. But if you have any content ideas that you want me to discuss, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'm very interested to hear what you all want to hear me talk about. But nonetheless, on today's show, it's all about basketball. We just talked about Kaden Magwood, why he needs to be a top priority. Another player that could end up being a top priority is a guy that rose pretty substantially in the most recent 24/7 sports rankings. A guy that was just inside of the top 50 is now a top 20 prospect. Shelton Henderson, 6'6", small forward, ranked as the 19th best player in the country, 4th best small forward, number 1 in the state of Texas. He plays at Bel Air high school in Bel Air, Texas, which for those who don't know is sort of in that southwest corridor of Harris County in Houston around Sugar Land, Kirby, somewhat close to NRG Stadium where the Texans play, but very, very good level of competition. Offensive skill set needs to continue to refine with Shelton, but the ceiling is extremely high. And Brandon Jenkins, national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, had some really intriguing things to say about Shelton. But before I get into that excerpt, I will tell you that he has scheduled 2 official visits, technically for the fall, but I'm going to say it's the summer because it's in August. The first one is to Louisville, August 23rd through the 25th. Now, I'm not sure if he has taken official visits elsewhere. I'm looking at his recruiting profile. I've done some research, really haven't seen anything, but Louisville is, for now, getting the first official visit, which is pretty significant news. For Louisville to get an official visit from a top 20 prospect, that is very, very huge news because don't forget, that's not really Louisville's recruiting MO. Louisville's recruiting MO is to go after the highly ranked 4-stars and, get them to be multiple year guys. When you can get a top 20 player on campus, that's some big time news. Now, he also had just received an offer and has scheduled an official visit September 27th through the 29th to Duke. Duke has shown to be probably a tougher level of competition than Kentucky over the past 7-8 years when it comes to high school recruiting. But nonetheless, it's going to be a tough recruitment regardless. Henderson is a very athletic wing that can play both ways, solid defender, a college-ready body, already 6'6", 220 pounds. He has the defensive switch ability, sort of reminds me a ton of Kanaya Roots in that he has the college body. He can guard multiple positions. He's athletic. He has a very solid frame for what he likes to do, which is play in transition. And he's going to be a player that is going to continue to rise up teams' respective big boards. But he already rose up the national recruiting rankings. This is what Brandon Jenkins had to say. Henderson is a physical specimen from the wing position. And get this, who arguably has the best long-term tools in the national class, end quote. That is very high praise because when you watch him play, he does a great job of cutting and getting to the rim. He is fantastic in transition, moves well for his size. There needs to be continued improvement from the perimeter shot, but a solid passer too. So can affect the game in more ways than one. Jenkins also says he operates as a playmaking wing who is loaded with intangibles that are off the charts. He boasts a man-child frame while possessing huge hands and long arms. Henderson has the build to overpower defenders on his drive at the collegiate level and should draw fouls with ease when looking to drive the basketball. He has a chance to be known for his two-way versatility. He has a tremendous feel for the game with shooting potential and the ability to guard multiple positions on the floor. To tap into his great upside, he must learn to demand the ball and impose his will with an assertive style. Down the road, he could really make a jump as he gains more and more confidence in what he brings to the table. His senior season is going to be one that people focus on to see whether or not that offensive skill set is improving the way that people hope. His game reminds me a ton of former Auburn star and now Cleveland Cavaliers starter Isaac Okoro, who was never really known for being like a number one scoring option, but he did everything else so well that you could live with it. He was a lockdown defender. Is Henderson a lockdown defender? I'm not sure, but like Okoro, versatile defender, switchable defender, can guard multiple positions. I think he could probably guard the 1 through the 4 if he had to, and the 5 in small ball situations. College-ready build, solid athleticism like Isaac Okoro. Okoro stepped foot on the court immediately at Auburn and made an impact. Offensively, was a streaky shooter in college, more so a guy that got downhill, slashed toward the rim, was opportunistic on offensive rebounds, and mainly operating in transition too. So a ton of parallels can be drawn between Isaac Okoro and Shelton Henderson. I think at this point in time, Okoro was ranked a little bit higher than I almost think that Okoro was ranked a little bit higher. Now, on ESPN, he was a little bit lower. Now, I don't really put a ton of stock into ESPN rankings. I'm more so of a 24/7 player or a 24/7 guy. Actually, Okoro, wow, I must have been really off base here because Okoro was barely top 40. So Henderson ranked higher than Okoro at this point, but nonetheless, very similar skill sets. So going to be one to focus on, especially with Louisville getting that first official visit as we see it. It is about 2 months away, but still a significant piece of information. We'll put recruiting off to the side for the moment and discuss something that Louisville hasn't done in almost a decade. We'll identify what that is here momentarily after we tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Today's episode also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part's guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Sorry about that. It took a little bit of time on that third transition. I do apologize for that. But nonetheless, you've been waiting long enough to hear what Louisville is doing for the first time in almost a decade. And if you've sort of kept your ear to the ground for men's basketball, you've likely heard this news. But for the first time since 2015, the Cardinals will be taking an international tour in the preseason. They did so in 2015 when Rick Pitino was the coach, down to I believe it was Puerto Rico, if I am not mistaken. It was either Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic. I actually think it was Puerto Rico, and they played both Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic national teams. Now, the two international teams that they will be playing to be determined, but they will be playing in the Bahamas. It's sort of a great preview for the battle for Atlantis that the Cardinals will take place in here coming up in a couple months. The opponents are to be determined in terms of the international opposition, but this is a great opportunity for the team. I like this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, like any team, this team has new faces, and you're going to have to work through some growing pains. You're going to have to gel as a team. And this is what I liked for the women's basketball team last offseason. They got to play in the Global Jam, and it offered them an opportunity to sort of gel with a brand new roster. This is definitely a brand new roster with 13 new players. So you get the opportunity to have guys get more comfortable with playing alongside one another, and you're playing against respectable competition that I want to see how Louisville fares, and you see what then again, it's hard to tell because it's early on and you're still a couple months before the season, but you sort of see what you're getting with this team. Another aspect of this that I like is that it extends practice time. As we know, in the offseason, practice time is limited. You're only allowed so much practice time per week. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I believe you get 10 additional practices because of the international trip. Now, honestly, that alone makes it worth it, regardless of whether or not you have a brand new team or not. So I like this from the instance that you get to play with a brand new team and you're playing solid competition. But I also like this from the situation that you get more practice time and you allow your guys some more time to gel. It seems like from all accounts from practice so far, it's been high energy. A lot of people have gone to these practices and they've been very fond of what Pat Kelsey and company have put on the court. But obviously, you would be naive to suggest that there are not going to be some growing pains early on. So to mitigate some of that, you can go on this international tour, play in the Bahamas, already become the Bahama Bullies. Look, Louisville basketball hasn't been memorable since we were the Bahama Bullies. It's time to get back to that title. When you claim that title back, that everything else will be right in the world. But regardless, I think that I keep coming back to, the term useful and necessary, because early on in the season, you're going to play some tough teams. And the more ready that you can be and eliminate some of those early season losses, the better your tournament resume is going to look, the better your team is going to be, obviously. The more fan support you're going to get, because people are going to see your team winning and saying, okay, this wasn't just off-season hype and talk. Like, this is legit. Like, Pat Kelsey talked the talk, but now he's showing that he can walk the walk. And it's just, it doesn't seem like much, if you take it for face value, although I'd say that it is significant because extra practice time, more time to prepare for the season, actual competition before the season, before you play some exhibition games early on. But in the grand scheme of things, it also helps because you're trying to implement a new system with so many brand new players. It's just an extremely valuable thing to have. I would love to see Louisville play internationally every single offseason, every single preseason, because I think that it helps your team. And it helps your team also bond together, man. Taking an early season trip, building those relationships, getting guys to play for one another. I think it's extremely critical to have that. So I ultimately would like to see how the Cardinals fare in those games, and we'll see how they do. Coming up here in August, the Cardinals will start, I believe it is – actually, no, it's not in August. It is in July. It's late July. It doesn't have the actual dates yet. They will be returning home on August 2nd. So the games have yet to be determined, but they will be playing those in July and then heading back to the Battle for Atlantis on Thanksgiving weekend. So that is going to wrap up today's episode of the show. If you have any ideas for content that you want to have discussed over the offseason continues through the end of this week, through the month of July before we get to August. So if you have any ideas of what you want discussed, be sure to comment in the section below. Thanks for tuning in. That's going to wrap up this Sunday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here coming up soon.